Lisa Heddens is somebody who we have wanted to come keynote this conference for years. We had her scheduled to come be a presenter for us, and then the pandemic hit. And so finally, we are bringing this to fruition. So I'm going to introduce quick, and then we'll let you get on to hearing Lisa's story. Lisa moved to Ames in 1984, where she attended Iowa State University and earned her teaching certificate in elementary education. She has 2 adult children, Mackenzie and Paul Heddens, and she's married to John McGelly. She served 17 and a half years in the Iowa State House, where she served on a variety of committees. She also served as the ranking member of the Health and Human Services Budget Committee. She's most notably known for her work on mental health and disability issues and her ability to work across party lines to sponsor the passage of legislation that provides increased supports, greater access, and increased opportunities for people with disabilities. Lisa's work and dedication in the disability field spans over 2 decades, from advocacy on disability issues to working at Iowa Protection and Advocacy, which you know as Disability Rights Iowa, working at Ask Resource Center, and as the executive director of NAMI Central Iowa. In 2014, Lisa took part in the Ames Citizen Police Academy, which educates participants to increase their understanding of the police department operations, procedures, and training. That's extremely important. I'm sure many of you know when we have kids who may be interpreted as displaying criminal behavior when what they're really doing is manifesting disability. And luckily, thanks to people like Lisa, more and more officers are coming to understand that better and better. In June of 2019, Lisa was appointed to serve on the Story County Board of Supervisors, where one of her many responsibilities is to serve on the Central Iowa Community Services Mental Health and Disabilities Region Governing Board. Whew, that's a mouthful, my goodness. She also serves as chair of the Mid-Iowa Community Action, or MICA, board, and as vice chair of the ARC of Story County Board of Directors. She has served on numerous other boards and commissions at both the state and local level. In her free time, she enjoys traveling, spending time with her family and friends, playing with her dog Riley, who is the cutest little dude, and listening to music and cooking. Fun fact, in the 9th grade, Lisa's history teacher gave extra credit to students who could recite all the president's name, first, last, or both. She can still recite all the last names in order. I'm going to have you prove that to us. Without further ado, Lisa Heddens.
Well, can you hear me okay? Okay, great, good morning. I was gonna stand around because I do like to walk around, but I thought then you're not gonna be able to see me or hear me very well, so I wanted to be up here. And no, I don't wanna recite the presidents, but I can prove that I do know that. Yeah. Thank you all for being here today. I'm really excited to be here. As Karen said, I was all planning to be here back in 2020, and then the pandemic hit and made it a bit more challenged to be able to do anything at that particular time, so it's nice to be here. A couple things I do want to say about my presentation is I will be going a little bit back and forth of my journey and then also my son Paul's journey before we go into advocacy. So you may be wondering a little bit, why are we going right along the timeline with Lisa and then we're backtracking with Paul? It's just the flow of how things go. And then you also notice my presentation looks like it has like flooring on there. That's because that's my technical inabilities. Because when I went to find a PowerPoint, I couldn't figure out how to get like a nicer just trim around, and this is what popped up as something available. So it has no connotation to anything. I tried to think of something what it might metaphorically mean, but it was the easiest one for me to put a presentation together on. So just being honest with you. So again, thanks for all for being here. So today, Karen's my clicker and stuff, so we'll go on to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey from parent to policymaker. As I said, I'm going to talk about my son Paul's journey, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about advocacy tools and how telling your story, how you can go about telling your story. We'll go on to the next one. So we're going to start with the early years, and this is going to go way back for me, because I remember when I was little, I wanted to be a teacher. Always wanted to be a teacher. And of course, I was looking for pictures that I couldn't find, but I remember asking my mom and my older siblings for like my birthday or Christmas. I always wanted teacher books, and I'd sit in my room to practice being a teacher. So that's what I wanted to do. I also wanted to work with kids with autism. And I don't know exactly why, but I think it was because when I would watch movies on TV, or some movies on TV, I would see some movies that portrayed individuals with autism. So that just stuck in my mind, and I thought, okay, this is people that I don't really know, but this is an avenue that I'd like to work with. We'll go next slide. So I graduated high school. I'm originally from Rochester, Minnesota. Then I got my associate's degree at DMAC and got my Bachelor of Science at Iowa State in elementary education with an emphasis on reading. And when I graduated college, then I had my first daughter, Mackenzie. We'll go on to the next. I feel weird not having a clicker and stuff. So 5 years later, I was pregnant and had my son, Paul. And it was not an easy pregnancy. I actually went into labor on Labor Day weekend, and he wasn't due till December. So I got, spent a lot of time on bed rest, was actually taken down to Des Moines by ambulance to be at Methodist, and stayed there until they got the preterm labor stopped, and then said I could go back to Ames. They did tell me, though, that when I got off the medication, that my son would be born probably within 3 to 5 days. And that's certainly what happened. I went off the medication to stop the preterm labor, and 2 days later, I had a young man. When Paul was born, of course, you're all excited about having your kiddo. And stuff. And, my husband and I were just elated to have this healthy baby boy. And he left then in the afternoon to go, take care of our daughter and stuff. Well, the pediatrician then came in to visit. And, of course, the pediatrician comes in without my husband being there, just me. And it was my daughter's pediatrician, so I knew who he was. And he stood back at the end of the hospital room, so not even next to me, and said, yeah, I went and did the well baby check. I think your son has Down syndrome. Is your husband going to be here later, and I can talk with you? Let me know when he gets here, and then he left. So that was my introduction of having a son with a disability. I called my husband and, trying to be calm to say that Paul has Down syndrome, and I burst out crying and told him. And so he rushed our daughter over to daycare, a friend of ours that watched her, and came to the hospital. Well, not knowing, he thought I said our son died of sudden infant death syndrome. So that started our grieving process of being on 2 different levels, because here I'm grieving that, the notion of that healthy baby and not having that, and he's thrilled to death that his son's not dead. So that was kind of a start for us of just really a challenge of just connecting as a couple of, how do you move forward with that? Because he's elated and he's trying to console me. It then, the doctor then did come in and talk with us and said he was going to, send the blood work off, but just to confirm it, but was pretty sure that's what Paul had. So you can see up there the picture of Paul. That's, I don't know, maybe he was 6, 8 months old or so. He loved having his bib up over his head. But that's the little notation that we sent out to family and friends. And one of the things we talked about saying in there is that we knew that he would have some challenges, but that we were, there to support him, and we just saw it as an opportunity to move forward within that challenge. So that was kind of our introduction of being things. I will say one thing that was very neat in the hospital is there was literature that was provided to us of people who had individuals with disabilities. So I was connected at that time to Mary Watkins and Becky Mead. And so that was kind of my initial connection for that. Well, I'm sure like most of you, when you have a child with a disability, you're pretty darn overwhelmed by that. I mean, Paul was a pretty easy baby, but just the idea of having a child with a disability was overwhelming to us. Visualizing the future was kind of hard to see initially. I actually called our local Mainstream Living. We have an organization up in Ames. I know it's in Polk County as well, because I wanted to go see a group home. And it wasn't because I wanted to place Paul. It's I had to get out of my mind what I saw on movies of where people with disabilities were. Because a lot of them, they were in institutional settings. And I had to get that out of my mind. I needed to see the future that I could provide for Paul. I knew where I wanted to go, but I wanted to know that that future was possible. So we went and looked at some early group homes back in 1990 and stuff. So, things have still even evolved over the years. But that was one thing that we did. We joined a support group to really get to understand and get that support that we needed. As you all know, you're overwhelmed when you start having all the acronyms that are thrown at you in special education or early access, the Iowa Family plans, your IFSP, your IEPs. We were told to apply for Medicaid, SSI. My brain is just like, oh, I don't even get what all this means and stuff. So that was just incredibly overwhelming for both my husband and I. I do recall going to our Department of Human Services and applying for the home and community-based waiver for Paul, not really quite understanding what all that provided, but everyone was kind of telling me, hey, you should go and do this. And gosh, I found that really a little bit demeaning when you went in to request services and the amount of paperwork that you have to fill out, the amount of times the paperwork that I sent in was lost in the process, and so then you have to resubmit it again. And just working through that system, I thought, gosh, that has to be a better way. And also thinking, I'm a pretty educated woman. What's it like for people that aren't, and the challenges they have to navigate the system? So that was, kind of my initial, I've got this interest of how do I make that system a little bit better. And then also applying for SSI. And if any of you have applied for SSI, I'm assuming many of you have before, holy cow, you gotta make sure that you have your records from when your child was born stating, the date they were diagnosed of having a disability, their IEPs, and everything else that you need to have along the way before you can even get approved for that. If you get approved, and then you have to apply later or appeal. So that was just incredibly crazy at that particular time as well. But, we made it through and stuff. Paul had a really good experience in school. It was just very positive. While he was going to school, we'll go to the next slide, I started getting involved with community boards and commissions. I served on the Mainstream Living Board and the ARC of Story County early on, so I've kind of come to fruition of actually being back on the ARC board again. I worked at Lutheran Services of Iowa. It's now called LSI, for their Family Resource Center, and we had a program for families with disabilities. And then, as Karen said, I worked for what is now Disability Rights Iowa, for NAMI Iowa, and then in 2002 I ran for the legislature, which I'll talk for a little bit more. served on numerous boards and commissions, the State Rehabilitation Council, the Mental Health and Disability Commission. Another one that I served on was our local fire department board, and actually got involved on disability issues with our local fire department board, and actually spoke at 2 national conferences related to working with people with disabilities in those type of emergency situations. Next slide. So these are a few pictures of Paul. Is that right? What is up there? Okay. A few pictures of Paul. So when Paul started school, he had to know how to walk because he used to butt scoot around. So he didn't start walking till he was about 3 years old. So right when he was entering preschool, we started out with a walker, and then he started just running right along. Then he moved on to kindergarten. We had great teacher in kindergarten and as para. And as you can see, Paul got married in kindergarten to, yes. He still stays in touch with one of the little girls, but he does have a different girlfriend now. So yeah. And then Chef Paul and I will talk a little bit more on that journey of his. Is he absolutely loves cooking and stuff, and that has been a great experience for him along the way. We were very lucky with his schooling in that from first grade until he graduated school, and Paul went on until he was 21, that he had the same para. And yes, I know that's very lucky for me. That's not always the case for a lot of people. And when he graduated high school, he went on to our community college we have in Ames. It's called the Hunziker Center, and he took culinary classes. And so that's where you see Chef Paul there. I think he was making macaroons or whatever. Paul has a very mature palate. So he's not one to like, he doesn't like boxed macaroni and cheese. Actually never really liked macaroni and cheese. He likes homemade macaroni and cheese. He likes spicy foods, very spicy foods. He likes if we have like lamb for dinner, or scallops are his favorite when we go out to dinner. Yeah, so like I say, he's got a very broad and always wants to cook. Always wants to cook, so that just seemed like a natural avenue for him. When he did graduate high school, he did get a job at Firehouse Subs and worked there for about a year and a half. He loved that job. I think he only missed 1 week of work in that time frame, and that was due to us being on vacation. Otherwise, he was every day at work at Firehouse Subs. And then the pandemic came. And like the nursing homes that shut down and people had limited visitation with their families in nursing homes, that was the same thing that they did with Paul's group home. So their group home shut down, and so Paul learned very quickly that Amazon is a great place to look for things and to text his mom and tell him all the things that he wants. So, and the group home that he was living in, he has had a little bit of a competition with one of his roommates. You know, they become brothers and sisters. And so if one got a package, another one had to get a package. And so, yeah, lots of movies that Paul has. I'm gonna go into the next picture there. So this picture here is the first house that Paul lived in. And you know, the idea of having him move into a group home was both exciting and scary. He recalled when his sister, when she graduated high school, she moved out, because that's what you do. You want your kids to finish up high school and move on to go to college, live out on their own. Well, he saw that. His sister, 5 years older than him, that's what he wanted to do. So we had already had him on a list to move into a group home. Friendship Arc is the organization that we are with up in Story County. And I remember being in the car with him, and the director at that time gave me a call and said that there was going to be an opening, and Paul's listening to me about a opening in a group home. And I was like, oh yeah, I think that would be a good time. And she said, well, August, there would be an opening in August, and this would have been 2014, I believe, that there would be this opening. And so I was like, okay, well, we could do that. And I hung up the phone, and I turned to Paul, and I said, so how would you feel about moving out of the house and, living in kind of your own place with some new roommates? And he went, yes, Mommy, I can't wait to go. And I'm like, I'm like crying, because I'm like, oh, my baby wants to move out of the house. I don't want him to do that. But that was just the natural thing. So he was, thrilled about the idea of being able to move out onto his own. So he moved into this first house here, and known as the Christie House. And this house was staffed 24 hours. So, and had 4 roommates. And, so it was a place that was very homey. It was scary for me as the mom to just move him out. I actually, for the first week when he lived in his home, I stayed the night at the house because, I don't know these people. I knew some of the people that were living there, some of the roommates that he had, but I don't know the staff. And then all of a sudden you just leave your kid with these people and stuff. So I stayed the night, each night at his house and stuff. But Paul really transitioned quite well. That fall is when Paul started going back to school. As I said, he went to the Hunziker Center, DMACC Hunziker Center for culinary school. So, and that was still part of his extension from high school. So he was able to finish that up and go till the age of 21, of which he absolutely loved. The picture here that we have here is my husband, John, playing during COVID, and since we could not go in the houses, I'd go over and bring Paul dinner, and we'd sit out on the back porch and have dinner across the patio from each other. But we got kind of the idea in my husband's fun time is he's a musician. And so we went over to the house, and we brought a chair and brought his guitar, and we asked Paul and his roommates and staff to come outside, and they stayed on the porch with their masks on, and John sang to the group. So it's just a way so they had some entertainment going on. So that was fun. While Paul was at this particular house too, he participated in what's called Project Search. Are any of you familiar with Project Search at all? I see a few of you are. So Project Search combines an internship and education opportunities for people with disabilities. And Paul did it through Iowa State University. He had 3 rotations, 1 at ISU Athletics and 2 in eating establishments at Iowa State. One was the Union Drive Marketplace, and the other was like Seaside or Seasons marketplaces where he interned with. One thing I found out during his internship is that when he was working at the athletics department, Paul was having lunch every day with the football players, every lunch. I did not hear about that from him. I heard about it from a friend of mine who said, yeah, it's pretty cool. Paul's having lunch every day with the football players. I'm like, he is? And this is a kid who calls me every night. And so I asked Paul one night when he called, and I said, I hear you're having dinner or lunch every day with the football players. I said, how come you didn't tell me? Because I'm thinking that's pretty cool, Iowa State football players. He's like, yeah. He goes, it's just the guys, Mom. So he didn't think a big deal with it. I did and stuff. But through Project Search, Paul's been able to get a job at Iowa State, which he's had now for almost a year. Absolutely loves his job. He works at Union Marketplace. He's now working in the deli area, making sandwiches and salads and stuff. So he absolutely loves that. Let's go on to the next slide. So in my particular journey, as I said, with Paul going along the way with his schooling and stuff, back in 2002, I ran for the legislature. And some of the reasons that gave me the reason to run was, one, as I mentioned, when I was at the Department of Human Services and I was applying for services for Paul, and just feeling overwhelmed and the amount of paperwork, and I thought, gosh, there's got to be a little bit more parent-friendly way to go through the system. The other was, I used to work at Ask, and one of the things we were seeing when I worked here as a family support coordinator is what you call them, or specialist coordinator, is we were seeing parents calling us, particularly from one particular county, who were always going to court on Tuesdays, and their kids were being CHINA'd, child in need of assistance, in order to get mental health services. And I thought, that makes no sense at all. Why would parents have to give up their rights? They're not giving up custody, but giving up their rights just to get mental health services. Made no sense to me. So I ran for office in 2002, and actually I'll take a step back. Before I did that, I talked with a mentor of mine, and she had told me to get on boards that I knew nothing about as a way to expand your education background. So that's how I got on the fire department board. I always thought fire was just hot and you put water or foam on it to cold it out. You know, after 10 years on the board and speaking at 2 of their national conferences and buying pumper trucks and, you know, everything else, I thought, okay, I know a lot more about fire than I ever planned to. But it just expanded my horizons. So in 2002, I did run for office and won, and served, as Karen said, 17 and a half years. I stepped down in 2019. Much of my work in the legislature was related to mental health and disability services. And I kept remembering the issue when I worked with ASK about parents seeking services and having to give up their rights to access mental health services for their kids. So I worked on legislation bipartisanly with some colleagues and passed some legislation so that parents under the mental health waiver didn't have to give up their rights to access those services. They could actually get them in their home. So that was one of the things that I worked on. I also worked on just expanding what you could receive under Medicaid services as well, because it's not about giving people with disabilities more, it's about leveling the playing field and giving them the same opportunities they'd have as anyone else would have in their process. In the legislature, it is a full-time job, but it's also part-time in that you're done at the legislative session just from January till about May. So at that time, I was also the executive director of NAMI Central Iowa, which is located in Story County. So I still kept the mental health and disability work in my system. In 2019, I stepped away from the legislature. I will say I enjoyed the legislature, but I was already looking at potentially stepping away and not running again. I kind of felt like after 17 and a half years was a long enough time. And so I was asked to consider running for county supervisor. One of our county supervisors was stepping down, and they thought I would be a good person to throw my hat in since he was stepping down to be appointed, and then I'd have to run for that position. I remember that particular time. The supervisor that contacted me to consider this was of a different party than me, and my husband and I were together, and unfortunately that weekend I was sick. I came down with pneumonia and stuff, and yet my phone is like blowing up all weekend and all week with text messages and emails and phone calls of people supporting the idea of me running for county supervisor. And it wasn't just from my party, it was from the other party as well. So I don't know, I probably had 100, 200 text messages and phone calls. I mean, that was just a bit overwhelming to me. So I threw my hat in the ring and was appointed supervisor and have been a county supervisor since then. So I've put on, you following along? Awesome. So I've put on some of the committees that I serve on as supervisor. And as supervisor, at least in Story County, each of us serve on, there's three supervisors, and each of us serve on about 9 different boards or commissions. And one of the things my 2 colleagues said was, Lisa, you need to serve on the Central Iowa Community Services, or CICS, board, governing board, because that's your background. You've got a background in mental health and disability services, and that's what you're working on. So that's one of them that I focus on. Aging, Board of Health, you can kind of see my list all there. There's one that's listed on there, it's called Healthy Communities. You can see on that list there. That's really something new. It's with our hospital, and they are really taking a look at what else can they do to make communities healthy, whether it's looking at mental health and disability, whether it's looking at housing, transportation, and food security. So I kind of bring that disability voice to the table as a parent and as a supervisor on that particular one. And then the one that says NACO, those are our National Association of Counties committees that I also serve on. And I really want to be the voice, again, for people with disabilities, because when you talk about economic development, I don't want them to forget about what type of supports and stuff that people with disabilities need. Move on to the next slide. So where is Paul today? Because you all know right now is I am a supervisor today. So Paul moved just this past September. He was living in a 24-hour home. This is his new home that he's living in. He's got 4 new roommates. It's definitely a bachelor's pad, 4 guys living there. It is in what is deemed as an intermediate home. So they only have staff for about an hour in the morning, and then from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to about 7 at night, and that's it. The house is monitored by what's called like an OWL system, and of course, you know, after COVID, OWL to me means the Zoom, and that is not what it is. It's like a technology system that you call. So after 7 p.m. at night, if Paul's getting home after 7, like we did last night, he calls. NOS is the system. Don't ask me what it stands for because I can't remember. But he calls the OWL system and just says, "This is Paul, I'm coming home to," and gives his address so that they know when the door opens that he's going in. Or if I do that and say, "Hey, I'm going to go in for a while and I'll be leaving 10 minutes afterwards," or something, so they know. Otherwise, it automatically starts their calling tree to figure out who left the house so that they know where they're at. It's a very unique situation. Each of their houses, too, that are built have a tornado shelter as well. So it's an all-concrete tornado shelter in their basement. So that's very comforting to me, especially when he doesn't have 24-hour staff, that he has that. You can see the picture of Paul's room, cyclone colors, that is his team. He did want the other 2 rooms to be purple because he's also a huge Vikings fan. But I said that would just be a little bit too overwhelming to do. And huge sports person. So you can see the baseball caps are on the top, and his Roman Reigns rug on the floor because he is a huge WWE person, as you can see from the other picture. We took him to a reception last night with Ask, and he missed his WWE last night, and we heard about it all the way home. So, but he did tell me he could make up for it, and I also found out last night, I think WWE's on like 4 or 5 nights a week, so I'm kind of figuring he could give up one particular day. But if Sports Page, are you familiar with like the old Sports Page? If Sports Page could be Paul's closet, that would be, because he wants every team. I've just put my foot down and said he couldn't have a Dallas Cowboys, and I'm sorry if any of you are Dallas Cowboy fans, and he couldn't have Green Bay Packers, because I'm a Vikings fan, and so those were the 2 teams that I've kind of told him he can't have. So, so that's just a little bit of what's going on in my role. So next we'll go on. So when you go on and talk about developing your own story, I mean, you all have stories, and you can all explain your story. It's really thinking about what is your story. When does your story begin? As I said, my story began, I always started when I was little because I wanted to be a teacher, and for whatever reason I wanted to work with kids with autism. And I think part of that too was, you know, when I went to school a long time ago, kids with disabilities came to school and then were in the basement. I didn't see them throughout the day. They weren't part of my classroom, and always felt that was kind of wrong. You also need to feel comfortable with how much you want to share in your story, because it is a personal story, and you need to practice it a lot, because you may get emotional sharing your story, and that's okay. You just don't want to be emotional each time through the entire thing, depending on the audience that you're going to, because they're not going to get your message then. And you also want to know, who are you talking to? Are you talking to legislators or your city council or supervisors where you want to narrow that story down? Or is it to a group like this where you want to share and elaborate a little bit more of what's been going on? And then also let people know that it's okay to ask questions, and I will leave time to ask questions at the end here. Because if you're not comfortable having people ask questions at the end that you just want to share your story and leave it at that, that's fine, but generally people are going to have some sort of questions that they're going to want to ask you, and you need to be feeling comfortable on that. Or if it's too personal of a question that someone asks you, it's okay to tell them, that's a little too personal, I don't care to share any further, or not at this particular time. Or not in this environment, I'd rather share more one-on-one with you. So that is okay to do. So next, I've just put up just what's like a little bit of a snapshot of Iowa's government. I'm sure you all know this, but just wanted to share how we have that. Next is, how do you develop your message and talk to your elected official? So one of the things, we'll go to the next one, it's preparing your message. So if you're going to talk to your elected official, whether you're talking to a legislator, your city council person, your county supervisor, you need to define what the problem is. I mean, if you're just wanting to go and just introduce who you are to them, that's fine. But if you want something fixed, something's not right in your area, you really need to define what is that problem. You need to put it into real terms. And when I say that is, how does it affect you? Personalize it. You know, if you've got a pothole that's in your road and stuff, talk about why that's a significant issue, how it affects you. Or if you're having trouble accessing Medicaid or one of the waivers, what's the issue? Is it the length of time? Is it the paperwork? Is it they're not even responding to any questions? So if you need something fixed, you need to personalize that. And then identify a possible solution. I know that you're not going to have all the answers for it because the job is for the elected official to do that. But if you have kind of an idea of what you think might be a solution, is very appreciative from that elected officials. And then you need to say what happens and why. Why do we want this to be changed? What's the big deal? So when you're preparing your message, make sure you research the issue, be knowledgeable on the issue. It's great to put a fact sheet together. Don't do 10 pages of facts. 1 page is great, just with some bullet points on there. Why it's important, and who are you directing your message to? I can recall when I was in the legislature that I would literally get calls from people talking about potholes in their neighborhood. That's not for me as the legislature to do. That's really a city council, or depending if you live in the rural area, that is something for your county supervisor to work with. So know who you should be targeting your questions to and stuff. I would also say too, if you are reaching out to your local state legislator or state senator, don't refer to them as congressman or congressperson. Had more than a times with that. They work out in Washington, D.C. I worked in Des Moines. Big difference. So just acknowledge, or again, do that research. You're going to get a better feedback when people actually think you've done that research. So when you're preparing your message, research your elected official. So as I said, know who your senator and representative is, or your mayor or supervisors, for depending on the issue. Especially if you're looking at the legislator, what committees do they serve on? And I'm not saying that you can't do that for county supervisors as well. We pretty much have that have that out there, but it's not always listed on their web pages what all committees they serve on. More so at the legislative level. Know a little bit about their background. Are they a farmer? Are they a former police person? Are they a former teacher? What is that little background? And then look for that personal connection. I always found that beneficial when people came to talk to me, or before I even ran for office and would go up to the State House, is I would try to find that connection. I remember early on, before I was in the legislature, of talking to Senator Yoakum, because she had a daughter with a disability as well. So I had that connection with her. I remember being down at the legislature, again, before I was a state representative, sitting in on a Health and Human Services Budget Committee meeting because I was interested in that topic. I was interested in potentially running for office. And so I was down there listening as to kind of what all goes on and how it's going to affect my child. And when I said to my friend, gosh, I might be interested in running for state legislature, she introduced me to my senator, which I knew who my senator was. My senator took me right up to the House Leader's office and said, this is Lisa Heddens, she's interested in running for office, and shut the door. You know, half hour later I came out kind of blurry-eyed of just what all happened there, and my friend said she'd drive home because I don't think she thought I was in the right frame of mind to be able to drive home after that conversation. But again, if you can make that a little bit of connection with people is great. Call your legislator or city council people on the phone or email them to meet. They want to hear from you. I can't tell you how many times as a county supervisor we have board meetings every Tuesday and how few people show up to those meetings. And the decisions we make affect everyone in our county, and hardly anyone shows up. And we've kept up having Zoom access. So even on Zoom, and we have public comment time, and I'll look and I'm like, okay, there's one person on Zoom and they're a staff person, and be involved. Attend forums with your legislators or council people. More so legislators do forums versus your city councils. They want to hear from you. Write them, send them a letter or email, and be sure to provide whoever you talk to your address, your phone number, or your email. Because if they want to follow up with you, if you haven't provided that, they're not going to be able to do that. When you're delivering your message, make sure you introduce yourself, identify your issue while you want to talk with them about it, how the issue affects you, let them ask you questions, you ask them questions, and then leave them some information. Again, just that one pager is fine. Your contact information, and then follow up with them because you want to make sure that you do that. Next. Best ways to advocates are kind of still very similar. Those personal visits are nice. Legislatures in particular, they are out of session in about May and stuff. It depends if the session goes long and what year it is. But it's really a good idea to try to reach out and meet with them in person if you can. I mean, you can talk with them on the phone. But I always found that when constituents would contact me and say, hey, could we meet for a half hour or for an hour for coffee and talk about this issue, I like doing that because it was more intimate. You're more willing to share more information. You weren't rushed. And I could ask you a bunch of questions about the situation, who it's all affecting, and what could I maybe legislatively do. And then I would work with staff to draft up some legislation. And I'd use you, because you came to me as the resource to find out, is this right? Am I getting at your issue? Is this going to be addressing your issue? So that would be something to do. Writing personal letters are fine. Calling them on a telephone, any of that is a good way to reach out. Things to avoid is do not be threatening. And when I say that, don't say if you vote this way, you know, we're going to vote against you, or we're going to, hold certain things that you're going to hold accountable to a person. I mean, you do want to hold legislators accountable. You just don't want to be threatening to them. And again, I remember a time up at the legislature, it was actually a physician came up to talk to me on a healthcare issue. And if you've ever been to the state capitol, outside the House and Senate chambers is the rotunda with the round railing, and you can see down to the first floor. Well, before they covered the first floor, you could see all the way down to the basement, or down to the cafeteria area. I'm a little bit afraid of heights, but this physician was talking to me on a healthcare issue, which I'm very interested in, but he kept getting into my personal space. And so you know how that is, then you take that step back from that personal space, and he'd take a step into my personal space, and I'd take another step back, and he'd take a step in again. And he's very passionate on the issue that he's talking to me about, to where he's like spitting in my face. So I'm no longer listening to him, because I'm thinking, God, this is really pretty crude. I'm getting spit on. And I'm now up against the railing. Again, I'm a little bit afraid of heights, and it goes all the way down to the cafeteria floor, and I'm kind of hanging on to it as he's talking to me. Don't do that. Don't do that when you're talking. Just, be genuine, be calm, present your issue, present your name, present the reasons why you're there talking to folks, and then leave them your contact information and tell them that you will be a resource for them, that they can call you because you're the expertise. You're the one who brought it to them. Tell them you can be a resource for them. Or if they want more information, that to contact you, you could get more information for them. Don't make them do the calling to 10 different people to get it. Say that you will get it for them, but they need that information so that they know who they're going to. Also, it's also good not to write form letters. I know a lot of times when there's advocacy going on, that they send out a template and say, hey, write something on this. I know it's pretty quick. A lot of times you need to get that out. But if you can personalize even just a paragraph in there. And I say that because, I would get, as a legislator, I would get 300-400 emails a day. That is the difference with being a county supervisor. I'm maybe down to 15 or 20 a day. But if I was getting all form letters on a particular issue, I was just sticking them into a folder. So I really wasn't reading them. So if you could put something at the beginning, I am your constituent, this is the issue, and talk a little bit personal on you, then you could go on with whatever else is in that form letter on it, but just make it a little bit of what's going on with you and how it's affecting you. And then I also found it's hard when you include multiple issues in one particular letter or one particular email, just because it's hard to delineate through it and which one's really your priority issue. If you've sent me an email with 20 different things on it, I don't know which is your priority. You may say, well, all of them are. Well, yes, all of them you want addressed, but which one's more pressing? And which one do you really want me to work on now? Because I'm probably not going to get all 20 done this year. But maybe there's one or two things that are your big issue. Let me know with that so I can work on that. And then get involved. There are so many organizations that need volunteers. And you could certainly reach out to them and get involved. As I said, I got on a board that I knew nothing about. My background was education. I was getting on boards with education. I had a son with a disability. I got on disability boards, but I got on the board for the fire department. So that was something new for me. Run for office. I never thought about, that was not in my plan. Running for office was never what I planned to do. It was just, I could either, what's the old adage, you could either sit on the porch or you could get out, run with the big dogs. I think that's how it goes, right? Whatever, I wasn't gonna be the one that was just gonna sit back and do nothing. I was gonna be the one who wanted to get some results done. And what was really positive for me is I had the support of my husband for running for office. He had flexibility in his job. When I did get elected, in that on Mondays, the legislature didn't start till 1 o'clock, and on Fridays we generally weren't in session, so he would go into work early those days. I could then go down, or I'd be home. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, he would go into work later. He'd get the kids off to school, but I'd already be down at the Capitol. I know that doesn't work for every family, and there's situations you need to work through, but that was just, how it made it work for us. I became the crock pot queen, so family came home, and there's always a meal, especially on Mondays. There's always a meal ready for them, so they didn't have to worry about getting home and doing things like that. And then, it is very fulfilling when you can make change, positive change, for people with disabilities. There is still so much more work that we need to do, and if you don't speak up, if you just listen to what's going on, legislators, your city council, your county supervisors, we think things are okay because you haven't told me anything different. So continue to keep your voice out there and tell them what isn't right or what isn't working. Make sure you also do praise what is working and say, hey, this is working, but this could make it a little bit better. So acknowledge things that are working, but don't be quiet. don't be silent. You need to provide some information to them. Otherwise, they're just going to think everything's okay, and they're going to go on and just work on other pieces of legislation or ordinances or other issues that are affecting their constituents. And I'm just looking at my time to see where I'm at. I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I do want to make sure that I have time for questions, because I'm assuming folks are going to have some questions, and I wanted to leave about 10 minutes to make sure that I had time for questions. So thank you, and anyone who has any questions, please let me know. And I'm sure you got questions. Oh, I do see a gentleman way in the back.
Of course,
Yep.
way in the back. Where?
He's in the back table, way back on the right. I think he's got a blue sweatshirt on. Yep.
Well, I saw something on YouTube of a pro wrestler who performs in a wrestling company called AEW, and he was in an interview and said that he had autism and ADHD. So when I heard that you were like talking about like autism, it made me think of him, and that he's like performing in AEW and like doing what he loves. So I would probably say do whatever you love, and also don't let your limitations stop you from doing what you love.
Bravo.
Well said.
Bravo. Anyone else with other questions? I can't believe with this type of room that you, yes, ma'am. Karen?
Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm glad to meet you,
Can you bring
Lisa.
your mic up just a little bit closer?
Said, my name is Anna, and I'm glad to meet you here. My son is 27, high-functioning Asperger's. We've been working with Voc Rehab, I swear, 7 years, and we're not getting anywhere. And there's the caseworker. They just do casework, and there needs to be, I would like an entire employment agency that would come up with different profiles of people looking for work, and then take it to employers and really pound the pavement for these jobs. The caseworkers can't do it. They look at it like it's a normal, typical person to find a job. And you can't expect the offload all that onto that employer.
Right.
Because they know nothing about neurodiverse and their needs. And I have found it is very difficult to advocate and educate at the same time.
Yeah, you know, that's a good question and an issue out there. Our Chamber of Commerce is actually having a meeting on June 6th, doing a disability workshop for businesses. And so I wish that would have occurred before I was here so I could share what they are doing. But they've heard from me, they've heard from one of their staff members who also has a child with a disability, about the positives of having a person with a disability work for their agency. I mean, Paul calls me every night, tells me about the wrestling score, whatever's going on, or what game or movie he's talking about. But he tells me every night, I ask him how work was, and he says it was awesome. And, you know, so he's had the support through having been through Project Search in there, and I think because of our community. But you're right, there's more that needs to be done working with businesses to acknowledge, kind of collate and figure out what type of supports that they can provide.
We have a breakout session this conference with the new director for Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services, be sure you go to that session because he'll be wanting to talk to you and hear from your ideas. Yeah. Good, do. Did you?
Karen, I see a couple questions in the back there.
I just have a.
Oh,
Lisa,
yep,
hi, Melanie, board president. Hello, everybody. Just to expand on her question, so is that something that other counties are going to start doing those, because that would be wildly beneficial, because she's
Project
exactly
Search?
right. Employers are afraid of what they don't know, and so
Right.
we need to educate them.
So are you meaning about Project Search or like what our chamber's doing? You know, I don't know, and I haven't been to the meeting yet because it's not till June to know what all it's going to be, what all it's going to entail. I just know that I'm going to the meeting, you know, on it. But they have an interest. One is because I've been speaking up forever with them, saying that, gosh, Story County's got like a 2.1% unemployment rate. They're needing people to work. And I said, well, people with disabilities, you know, their unemployment rate is like 13% in the state of Iowa. So there's an untapped population that with minimal accommodations and support could be your worker. And it's helping them find what they want to work in. Paul likes being a chef, you know. Things he makes at his house on Tuesdays, that puts me to shame, you know. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm a grandmother raising a grandson who is desperately looking for a job. We live in a rural community, and it is large enough that there should be plenty of jobs. How do we educate our community in order to get them to hire these people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's again, I think if you've got a chamber, it's working with them, it's talking with them. If you have like an ARC or some other disability organization in the area can help provide it. It's really talking about what your child or people in your areas, what they can do versus what their limitations are. It's keeping that out there. I know the challenge is, it is a big challenge out there, and I can't say I have all the answers. Maybe the new director with Voc Rehab for that session today will have some other suggestions. If I've just put them on the spot, I'm sorry, but you know, I think that is something that needs to be done, because there's oftentimes, I mean, Paul doesn't want to stay home and just play video games all day, although he would, quite honestly. But he wants to be out, and he told me the other day he wants to work for more money, and I asked him why, and he said so he could buy more junk food, and I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, there still needs to be education opportunities out there, and it is a struggle, because people don't always see people with disabilities as the population to hire, and that's unfortunate. I see there's somebody else with a question.
Yeah, I'm a caregiver of my daughter. She's on the autism spectrum, and she's 22. We're in the Des Moines community. She went through the STEP program, and she did go through IVR. We got transferred over to Best Buddies because IVR is a struggle right now. I think there's short staff too. But yeah, we weren't getting anywhere with IVR, and STEP, it's a struggle. I mean, trying to find the best fit for what they're really good at. I mean, my daughter wanted to she tried Starbucks at Drake, she tried the doggy daycare because she loves animals, but the best fit we found for her is data entry. She loves it, good at it, it's a good routine, that's her best strength. But in order to find the best place to do that, I mean, we have corporate companies downtown all over. I work for Nationwide. I even tried to talk to my supervisor or anybody in HR to say, hey, can you provide something through STEP program? Because the people at STEP program are trying to find these jobs and incorporate that, but the corporate companies, I don't know if they're not knowledgeable on what's out there and what's needed. And that's the biggest thing, is getting corporate companies to be more knowledgeable or what they can help with,
Well,
so that we can have that support.
Right, you know, and maybe this is where maybe approaching your chamber or even just with your local business to see, you know, could you do like a presentation from, you know, a disability organization to talk about the unemployment rate and the opportunities that people with disabilities can provide to their organization. You know, maybe it's talking with the chamber and saying, hey, you know, there's this untapped population, but businesses don't really know. And you're right, their reluctance isn't necessarily, no, we don't want to hire folks. It's they don't know what the need is. And oftentimes they think the need is much greater. I think generally accommodations, I think research has said if someone needs accommodation at work to do the job is usually less than $500. So it's not usually something that's going to break the bank for an organization, but they don't know that. You know, they're thinking it's going to be thousands of dollars and it's going to, you know, enter into their profits versus something smaller. Having that type of information to provide to them, you know, sounds like a work group to be a part of for solutions.
My name is Lynn, and I actually am located in Northwest Iowa, and I am a vocational educational specialist with a certified community behavioral health clinic. Iowa's trying to become a pilot state with that program. What I do is funded through CCBHC, that's the acronym, CCBHC. Many communities in Iowa have that. You might not know about it. It's through behavioral health, it's through mental health. My job is to help people find jobs, is to talk to employers, is also to help them with the education system. So younger children families dealing with issues with school systems. And I'm in a very rural area, but please know that this is something that may be a resource in your area. It's just not very well identified yet. Look up your mental health region, and there is going to be a list of people to contact, okay? And reach out to them and ask, because there are these services. It just might not be through the avenues that you are familiar with, but it is there. And with Iowa hopefully being approved as a pilot state for this service, there should be a lot more coming in the next year or so.
You know, one last thing I'm going to mention to wrap up is when I talked about serving on boards and commissions and being on one that you're not as familiar with. I mean, I was always an advocate at the legislature saying that a person with a disability or a family with a disability needs to be on like economic development type of boards. So if you have a board in your area, your city, your county that deals with economic development, see about being on that, because that is an avenue of a voice for you to talk about the needs of people with disabilities and what they can provide. But again, if we're not saying anything, everybody's thinking everything's okay.
Lisa, the first time that I did that, it was such a foreign experience compared to advocating for my own kids. Mm-hmm. Moving to advising at a universal level. Can you talk a little bit as just sort of a wrap up, how to prepare, what to think about, what some resources people should think about are?
I want some clarification. So are you talking about advising, being on a board?
Being on a board, yeah. And so, you know, you walk in and you think, okay, now I'm going to advocate just like I did for my children, but I'm doing it now with this group of people. But really, it's a very different skill set, and it takes a while to uptake it.
It does. I mean, you have to go, and if you're going to serve on a board or commission, yes, you're going to kind of go in with the mindset that this affects my kid, and you want to do things better for my kid. But, you know, over my nearly 30 years now with my son, I've met so many different people that what affects my kid affects your kid or affects my neighbor's kid. So that's kind of the mindset that I would go into meetings is, well, yes, this is I want to make things better for my kid, or I want to make it easier for the next one that comes through. My mindset was always, I want to make things better for the broader spectrum of people. And that's kind of the mindset that you have to go into. So when you're like serving on a fire department board or, you know, the ARC or a business board or something, the reason that you're there is one, you know, I would say if you've got an interest in it, don't get on it if you have absolutely no interest. It's just nice to expand beyond what you feel comfortable in. you got an interest in growth in your community, you want to be a part of that. And hey, by the way, as we're talking about growth and the needs in are we accommodating for people with disabilities? You know, are we looking at that particular workforce in there? So you're not kind of shoving things down the throat and saying, okay, this is my tunnel vision and my only thing I want to look at. You want to help educate and provide that wider view for that particular group when you're talking with them. So yeah, it's, you know, when I got in the fire department board, again, I told you, fire was hot. I used water foam to put it out. Really didn't know anything about it. But I learned along the way to where the group that I was a part of kind of looked at me as a leader on those particular issues. So it took a little bit of time. You can't expect change to happen right that minute or even that first year of a 4-year term. You have to be patient in that. But if you're not a part of it, things are not going to change. And I know we're all busy and we don't want to do like one more board or something to be on it. But if you don't do it, who else is going to do it? And then find somebody else when you're ready to move on who will step in and keep that conversation going. Anything else?
Thank you, Lisa, very much.
Thank
for
you
your
all.
time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Karen, there's a question here I didn't see. May I take that one question?
Yep, you bet.
Go ahead. Okay. Hi. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I am Abby with Thrive Together. Anyway, yes, I have a disability and I cost a lot. And I've heard that over and over throughout my life. But I'm constantly advocating. And you as a parent and a policymaker, you're making that advocacy, but you feel defeated. Why do I keep going? Number 2 is money. When I advocate, we need services for the deaf and hard of hearing or a person with, a disability. Oh, legislation always goes, oh, the budget, they'll talk about it. They will. How do we, as a deaf person, go in and talk about budgets? Because everyone needs money, and I get that. But persons with disabilities who have issues, anyone comes in, you're going to have to spend some money on them. So what is your advice on how to make that suggestion to stand out so that we can do more for our communities?
Yeah,
Excellent
good question. Very good question. Is if you're able, and again, I know a lot of people are working and stuff, is attend some of the subcommittees or like the budget committees that are going on at the state legislature. Talk with your local legislator, your local senator and representative. Have them get to know you and what the issue is. When you say there needs to be more money, they're going to want to know why. Why does there need to be more money? What providing more money to this organization or to the disability, what is putting more money towards the Medicaid waiver going to do? Or what's more money for deaf and hard of hearing going to do? What results is that going to maybe provide? So that's something you need to educate them on. I've often heard from people to say, well, my legislator won't listen to me. Well, you still keep it in front of them, but you also find people that understand where you're coming from. Find some allies in the legislature, but you don't discount your own because you are their constituent. You want to keep them in the loop, but you find other people that are there to say, this is my issue, this is why we need funding. If we don't have the funding, this is how it's going to impact me. I'm not going to be able to get a job and be paying taxes and providing dollars back into the economy. Or I can't pay for childcare, so I'm going to have to stay home. Real life, how does it affect you? And let them know. Okay. All right. Yep. Thank you,
Lisa.
you all.
If you have not filled out your purple evaluation sheet, please do so and leave it in the middle of your table. And you have a little bit of break to network with each other and go visit